Hi everyone, I'm Merve from Early Childhood Education. Today I would like to talk about the differences between English Sign Language. Firstly, I will talk about the sign language and its feature. Then we will look at the types of sign language around the world. Thirdly, I will mention the characteristic of ASL and BSL. Finally, I will explain the differences between ASL and BSL and the conclusion remark. Let's look at the meaning of the sign language firstly. Sign language is a visual means of communicating through hand signals, gesture, and facial expression and body language. Is language system used mainly by those who have a hearing impairment or are deaf. Many people are under the misconception that sign language is universal, but there is no single sign language used around the world. Like spoken language, the manual language differs significantly from one geographic region to the next. Sign language developed naturally out of the group of the people interacting with one another. Region and culture play a significant role in the development as well. Most sign language are not mutually intelligible. Therefore, people who do not sign the same language cannot understand one another's sign. There are somewhere 200 different type of sign language used around the world today. And then we look at the question that why are there so many sign language around the world? Sign language, like spoken word, takes many different forms. There are more than 300 different sign language in use around the world today. As I said before, they vary from nation to nation. Even in countries where the sign language is spoken, sign language can have many different regional accents that bring subtle variation to people's use and understanding of signs. While there are similarities between some of the most common sign language, there are also many differences. And it's not just the sign that vary. The speaker's facial expression, gesture, and the body language can all have a significant bearing on how a sign language is communicated. Which is why there are so many different forms of sign language, not just in the UK or USA, but around the world. Similar to verbal language, ways of communicating develop within the cultures and group of people unique to the area that they live in. Because accent and dialects also exist within the sign language, as sign language is more of a secluded form of communication, there tends to be a considerable variation between regions. Therefore, these interactions will be different between communities. As an example, BSL has many dialects that vary region by region. That's why signs in Scotland may not be understood in the southern England. When we look at the how sign language is developed part, it's not unusual for of a sign language to advance from a parent sign language. An example that highlights this can be found in similarities between ASL and French Sign Language. Despite the geographical distance, they bear resemblance due to the introduction of the methodological sign system produced in France during the 18th century. Laurent Clark, a French teacher who was deaf, shared this system with American deaf communities and created a new education system named American School for the Deaf. Let's move on to types of sign language around the world. Firstly, ISL, Irish Sign Language. When we look at its features, today most people in Ireland speak English, but deaf people in Ireland speak Irish Sign Language, which is derived from French Sign Language as well. ISL is mainly used in Northern Ireland and language, although ISL has been somewhat influenced by BSL. It remains quite distinct. because the alphabet is signed using one hand. As of 2040, around 5,000 deaf people, primarily the Republic of Ireland, but also another Ireland, use Irish Sign Language to communicate. I just want to talk interesting facts about ASL. Many Irish deaf students were educated in Catholic schools that separated students by gender. So for a time, men and women each had their own dialects of ISL. However, the differences have diminished over the time. And let's move on to the other one, Auslan, Australian Sign Language. Auslan is a sign language that is used by the deaf community in Australia. The term Auslan was first used in the early 1980s by Trevor Johnson, but the language itself, a lot of older Auslan, has two main dialects, Northern and Southern. They have different signs of things like animals, colors, days of the week. However, grammatical structure is the same across dialects. The sign language that is used by the deaf community in Australia is closely related to BSL and New Zealand Sign Language and ZSL, all of which hail from the BA and ZSL language family, despite the fact that America and Australia both speak English. ASL and Auslan are very different. Auslan uses two-hand alphabet, while ASL uses one-hand alphabet, handed alphabet. Auslan includes some signs derived from Irish Sign Language as well. Deaf Indigenous Australians may use Auslan or one of the native Australian sign languages that are unrelated to Auslan. The far north Queensland dialects of Auslan incorporates features of the Indigenous Sign Language too. Let's move on to BANZSL. Is a sign language family which encompasses British Sign Language, Australian Sign Language, Auslan and New Zealand Sign Language. In fact, the three types of sign language can be considered a dialect of BA and ZSL because they share most of the signs and use same manual alphabet and the same grammar. BA and ZSL are used in Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, but they are also used in many other countries across the globe, including South Africa and part of Canada. According to some scholars, Swedish Sign Language is also part of the BA and ZSL as a descendant of BSL. NZSL is a sign language that is used by the deaf community in New Zealand, just like Auslan. NZSL is closely related to with BSL and originates from the same language as the latter. It's recognized as an official minority language in New Zealand only since 2006. And also, I just want to add the Chinese sign language because if we compare the other sign language that I mentioned before, Chinese Sign Language is the most popular one around the world. There are nearly 5 million people use Chinese Sign Language. When we look at the American Sign Language and its feature, American Sign Language, mostly known as ASL, is primarily a visual language used by the deaf community. It's mainly used in US and parts of Canada, but its variations are also used in many parts of Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, I'm sorry for that. West Africa and some countries of South America also. Around 250,000 and 500,000 people in the United States claim that ASL is their native sign language, which is quite a large number. The 10 states of the America that officially recognize ASL as the official language of the people, deaf people in those states are Alabama, Colorado, Georgia, India, Maine, Massachusetts, Montana, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, and Utah. Some experts believe that ASL is developed based on French Sign Language. French Sign Language ASL used a one-handed finger spelling alphabet, but in reality it was influenced by Martha's Vineyard Sign Language and other local sign language. American Sign Language or ASL has its own syntax and rules of grammar. It changed over time and has common linguistic properties like other language. ASL consists of various facial expression specific signals, body movement, views of physical space, one-handed finger spelling, and signing, which varies based on hand shape, palm orientation, location, and movement. And I just want to talk about the ASL and BANZSL differences and the rather than to the BANZSL, American Sign Language is more similar to French language. This is due to the fact that Thomas Hopkins guided the pioneer of in education of the deaf in the United States, borrowed more signs from Old French language than from BSL. In early 19th century, Glydet visited Thomas Brights with schools for the deaf to learn more about the methods used in Braidwood's school, but he was rejected. He therefore traveled to Paris, where he learned methods for educating the deaf from the French Royal Institution for the Deaf that has used the communication Old French Sign Language and signs that were developed by French, father of the deaf, Abbé Charles Michael de Fiep. ASL is unrelated to BANZSL, although there is a considerable overlap, but while ASL and BANZSL have only slightly more than 3% identical and slightly less than 45% cognate signs, the language of BANZSL have over 80% identical and 98% cognate signs. Let's move on to features of the British Sign Language. As its name suggests, BSL is British Sign Language, is the most widely used sign language in the UK. BSL is a visual gestural language using hand shapes, facial expression, gestures, and body language to convey meaning. There are around 151,000 BSL users in the UK, and about 87,000 users are deaf, and it is also used by the families and relatives of deaf people, signs language interpreters, and BSL learners. This is a very old sign language that evolved at Thomas Braidwood schools for the deaf in the late 18th and the 70s and 80s. And then it spreads to Australia and New Zealand. That is why you can see Australia Sign Language and New Zealand Sign Language are therefore quite similar because they are use same grammar, the same manual alphabet, and much of the same vocabulary. Again, some signs language experts claim that BSL, Auslan, and New Zealand Sign Language are dialects of the same sign language, called BANZSL for shortly. Despite high degree of overlap, there are also differences emerge between branches of BANZSL family over time. This is why national variation have appeared that a deaf person from Australia or New Zealand may have different difficulties communicating with BSL user and vice versa. Even within the UK, different regions have their own unique dialects and syntax or grammar structure. This means that a deaf person from the south of England, for example, may use different signs to someone from Scotland or the north. BSL also has many dialects that vary region by region. For example, I also said before, I remember, signs in Scotland may not be the same as the England. That's why some signs are even different from city to city. When we look at the ASL and BSL differences, ASL and BSL both have similar fundamental features of sign language, such as the use of classifiers and topic comment syntax, but they are different language each other. They have a long list of differences, but the most significant differences between ASL and BSL is the use of one-handed manual alphabet in ASL and two-handed manual alphabet in BSL. ASL is so completely different from BSL in terms of the alphabet and numbers. For example, the vowels in BSL are done using your thumb and forefingers, and there's a lot of two-handed work for the rest of the alphabet. On the other hand, the vowels in ASL, the rest of the alphabet, are done with one hand. So let's watch the video which focuses on differences between BSL and ASL together. I just want to share a video for you to understand the differences between. Give me a second. Okay, I hope you are see the video. Let's watch a little bit and talk about the differences. Actually, I think this video gives a great indication on just how BSL and ASL really are and how difficult it will be for a British deaf person to communicate with an American deaf person. This video really shows just how different these two languages. This video gives a great indication on just how BSL and ESL really are, and how difficult it would be for a British deaf person to communicate with an American deaf person. Designing this video really shows just how different these two languages really are, and the alphabet, especially in ASL, are so completely different from the BSL. For example, the vowels in BSL are done using your thumb and forefingers, and there is a lot of two hands work for the rest of the alphabet, whereas the vowels in ASL and the rest of the alphabet is done with the one hand. And another big difference is that there is a lot of finger spelling in ASL, whereas BSL users mainly use it for proper nouns such as names, places, when first said. But once you given the name, you would use someone's sign name or initial it in the case they do not have one. Place names tend to have signs to mean it. Some are obvious, but others require local knowledge to understand the origin. Sign language are the practice of using proper grammatical elements, vocabulary, and syntax and grammar structure. Through this, there is a numerous overlap in vocabulary and similarity in signs. ASL and BSL are unrelated sign language, completely separate and distinct. The people using ASL and BSL cannot be understood by each other's signs, even after adopting language features or vocabulary from one another. They still remain pretty unique, which is the exact case with ASL and BSL. I just want to a conclusion to all of my presentation. Today I talk about differences between sign language. All in all, sign language can vary from region to region. For this reason, great differences can be observed in the sign language of the nations speaking in the same language. For instance, ASL and BSL. I just talked about the differences. Sign language in English speaking countries are ASL, BSL, and BNZSL and ISL. Each of them has different grammatical structure. At the same time, they have similarities in the same signs and facial expression. Also, their alphabet may differ, and use of two or one hand manual can be seen. Manual alphabet using one-handed in ASL just can be seen. This name is dactylology. While in BSL is two-handed urology, meaning. Thank you for your kindly attention. I'm just very happy, and you think you can see the references list in the page below the presentation. I'm sorry, I just done a lot of mistake. I'm aware of that. I'm just so excited about the presentation. Have a good day. Thank you. This video gives a great indication on just how BSL and ESL really are, and how difficult it would be for a British deaf person to communicate with an American deaf person. Designing this video really shows just how different these two languages really are, and the alphabet, especially in ASL, are so completely different from the BSL. For example, the vowels in BSL are done using your thumb and forefingers, and there is a lot of two hands work for the rest of the alphabet, whereas the vowels in ASL and the rest of the alphabet is done with the one hand. And Another big difference is that there is a lot of finger spelling in ASL, whereas users mainly use it for proper nouns such as names, places, when first aid. But once you given the name, you would use someone's sign name or initial it in the case they do not have one. Place names tend to have signs to mean it. Some are obvious, while others require local knowledge to understand the origin. Sign language are the practice of using proper grammatical elements, vocabulary, and syntax and grammar structure. Through this, there is a numerous overlap in vocabulary and similarity in signs. ASL and BSL are unrelated sign language, completely separate and distinct. The people using ASL and BSL cannot be understood by each other's signs, even after adopting language features or vocabulary from one another. They still remain pretty unique, which is the exact case with ASL and BSL. I just want to a conclusion to all of my presentation. Today I talk about differences between sign language. All in all, sign language can vary from region to region. For this reason, great differences can be observed in the sign language of the nation speaking in the same language. For instance, ASL and BSL. I just talked about the differences. Sign language in English speaking countries are ASL, BSL, and BNZSL and ISL. Each of them has different grammatical structure. At the same time, they have similarities in the same signs and facial expression. Also, their alphabet may differ and use of two or one hand manual can be seen. Manual alphabet using one-handed in ASL just can be seen. This name is dactylology. While in BSL is two-handed urology, meaning thank you for your kindly attention. I'm just very happy and you can see the references list in the page below the presentation. I'm sorry, I just done a lot of mistake. I'm aware of that. I'm just so excited about the presentation. Have a good day. Thank you.